Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Macbeth, Act 1, Scene 2. When shall we three meet Macbeth? That's right, we've got to the second scene. We still don't get to meet the chap in person. We, just like in the first scene, hear about him. Now in this case we hear about him from the good guys, not the bad guys, and from everything that is being said he sounds pretty epic. Great fighter, loyal to the king, super skilled warrior. He is the bee's knees in the eyes of everyone, and that everyone most importantly includes King Duncan, his son Malcolm, and we also hear the expert opinion of the captain or the sergeant, depending on what you want to call him, who has been fighting with Macbeth side by side. Now this is actually very clever of Shakespeare because again it's increased anticipation of when we do finally meet him in Act 1 Scene 3. It creates a little bit of mystery, and it also perhaps negates any of the kind of feelings we might have had from the previous scene meeting the witches. Now, before we start looking at the scene in detail, I'm going to give you a little bit of context again for your AO3, and in this case we're going to look at tragic conventions with a focus on the tragic hero, as described by our resident expert on tragedy, Aristotle himself. So there are a few things that you need to know about a tragic hero to see you through. So first of all, they should be of high status, they should be noble or royalty, because the higher they are at the beginning, the further they have to fall. Not only should they be high status, they should be good, they should be virtuous at the beginning. It's not just about their position, there should be a sense of kind of a moral compass. However, just because they're good and have a moral compass, it doesn't mean they're not flawed, because actually every tragic hero that's worth a salt has a tragic flaw, and if you want the fancy term for that, it's called hamartia. You've got that here spelt out for you in the parenthesis. And in Shakespeare's, in Macbeth's case here, his hamartia is his ambition. It's his desire to have more. And the thing about hamartia is that its function is to actually bring about the downfall of the tragic hero. By the end of the play, as the tragic hero is coming to the end, you know, their demise, their death, let's be fair, it's not a spoiler, it's a tragedy, what do you expect? They should recognise in some way their flaw or their hamartia. They should have a kind of moment of epiphany. We call it a anagnoresis, if you want the fancy word, this kind of moment of realisation just before they die. And no great tragedy wouldn't be a tragedy without a huge, horrifying end. So they start up high, they are good, they are virtuous, they have a tragic flaw, and then they fall to huge, huge depths. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at how Shakespeare sets up Macbeth early doors, Act 1, Scene 2, as the tragic hero at the height. You know, so we're looking at him at the best that he ever is before he then falls. Okay. So we're going to start off by having a little look at what the captain says about Macbeth's fighting style and skill. So the first thing that you'll notice here is he's using the third person. He's talking about someone else. At this moment, he's not talking about Macbeth. His damned quarrel, it's MacDonald who's one of the enemies. So Fortune on his damned quarrel smiling showed like a rebel's whore. Ooh, fruity. Lots going on here. So we've got the personification of Fortune, because Fortune is smiling. So Fortune is like luck. So he's saying that luck was smiling down on the enemy. And then we've got this rather rude simile, like a rebel's whore. So he's basically saying that the luck or fortune is kind of like the mistress of the enemy. So completely and utterly on his side. And then we've got this contrast when he then juxtaposes that with Macbeth. Brave Macbeth, well, he deserves that name. Note the parenthesis. Parenthesis is like little brackets. So you can do them in little brackets like that, or you can do it with hyphens, just as done here. So in the parenthesis, he then repeats the assertion, well, he deserves that name. And by using the phrase that name, he's basically saying that brave is part of Macbeth's title. It makes up his identity. So brave Macbeth, disdaining fortune with his brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution. So much to unpick there. Again, that continuation of the personification of fortune is happening here, but unlike MacDonald, Macbeth disdains fortune. He scorns luck. He looks down on luck, i.e. Macbeth don't need no luck because he's got skill. And then we get this description of his fighting style. So his brandished steel, so imagine him wielding his sword around his head. He's brandishing it with pride and prowess. And he's moving it so fast, this metaphor here, that it smokes. It's like it's on fire, but with bloody execution. So it's all of the blood on it that is making it sort of seem like it's on fire. So you imagine like the colour red there as well. So crackingly emotive metaphor to describe the bloodshed that Macbeth is inflicting upon his enemies. You've got another simile here, like Valor's minion carved out his passage till he faced the slave. So again, Valor here is personified, suggesting that Macbeth works for Valor. He's his minion, he's his servant. He carves out his passage, another metaphor. Note how gruesome and emotive it is. It's like all of the enemies, all of the people surrounding him is nothing but meat that just needs to be cut through. Blah. And then when he gets to the slave, he unseams him from the nave to the chaps and fixes his head on the battlements. So let's just think about that metaphor. Unseams him. He picks him apart. Imagine like a zip or like a hem on clothing, and the threads are just going boop, 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 boop. That's him with his sword going all the way up right to here. Then he chops off his head and sticks it on the battlements. So again, a kind of like a show of pride. Duncan, King, is thrilled. He's like using exclamatives. Oh, valiant cousin, worthy gentleman. Minor exclamatives, actually, filled with like really complimentary adjectives. Valiant, again, brave, worthy. So he likes this, even though us as a kind of modern day audience might feel a little bit ick about all the violence. Back then, this is glorious stuff. He's doing the job well. Okay. Moving slightly further on in the scene, the captain reports the fact that you know, the enemies came back with a fresh assault, and Duncan is like, oh, wasn't he worried? Weren't they worried about this? Dismayed not this, our captains Macbeth and Banquo. Note the hyperbaton. Inverted syntax is what that means when you kind of swap the sentence order around. So rather than saying weren't Macbeth and Banquo dismayed, it puts dismay at the front of the sentence. Dismayed not this, so it puts more emphasis on it. Dismayed not this, our captains Macbeth and Banquo. And then the sergeant's like, yeah, as much as, you know, an eagle's going to be scared of a sparrow, or a lion's going to be scared of a hare, lol. So, sorry, what we've got here is this zoomorphic simile. Zoomorphic basically means using animal imagery. So a zoomorphic metaphor, a zoomorphic simile is when the comparison is with an animal. You can just say simile if you like, but if you want the fancy terms, it's there. So we've got this little long moment where he's basically saying didn't matter how good the other side were, they weren't frightened. In fact, what they actually did was get even better. They fought even harder. And so we've got this repetition here. Again, we've got another simile. Cannons overcharged with double cracks, so they doubly redoubled strokes upon the foe. So look at this repetition of doubly redoubled in slightly different forms, but emphasizing just how fast and hard they responded to this battle. And then we've got this biblical allusion at the end. This is really gross, this emotive language here, except they meant to bathe in reeking wounds. He's like, the only thing he could think was that they just wanted to have a bath in all the blood of the, the enemy. Or memorize another Golgotha. Golgotha was the scene of the crucifixion. So this biblical allusion is really, really punchy. He's basically saying that their fighting, their skill was on a level with the violence of the crucifixion. So again, we're justifying here Macbeth's skill, his prowess, his ruthlessness, his resilience in the battlefield, all things making him this incredibly heroic warrior, elevating his status, because he's doing all of this for the rightful king. So that makes him a good egg. Or does it? Okay, subtle point for you here. So Norway himself, so King of Norway, the big bad, with terrible numbers, assisted by that most disloyal traitor, the Thane of Cawdor. Now, I've just underlined that, okay, because that's a really important moment for later on. So there is another chap who was disloyal, who betrayed the king, went over to the other side, and he was called the Thane of Cawdor. So it began a dismal conflict, till that Bellona's bridegroom, here's our metaphor, yeah, Bellona's bridegroom. Bellona is the goddess of war, so Macbeth is her husband. Nice. And note the plosive alliteration, the but. And you've also got a little bit of it here, lapped, proof, So those sort of explosive sounds, like harsh and full of volume, just like the fighting. Confronted him with self-comparisons, that's a little typo. Rebellious arm against arm. Sorry, the comma should be there. Curbing his lavish spirit, and to conclude, the victory fell on us. Okay. What we've got here is we've got some repetition. The point, the arm, the arm. If you want to be fancy, you can say a penalepsis, because you've got words repeated at the beginning and the end of the structures. You can just call it repetition. But you also have this kind of sense of symmetry and symbolism here. This is really important. So Macbeth meets the King of Norway, Duncan, his king's most feared opponent and enemy. And although you might argue that Shakespeare's saying they're matched, he is as good as the King of Norway, there's something in the symmetry, it's almost like a mirror image, point against point, rebellious arm against arm, like Macbeth is looking into a mirror, someone who attacks the king. Is this a really clever bit of symbolic foreshadowing, hinting to the audience that Macbeth too will become Duncan's greatest enemy? Interesting idea. Right, how does the scene end? Very, very quickly, no more that Thane of Cawdor fell to sea, for some interest go, pronounce his present death, and with his former title Greek Macbeth, i.e. the Thane of Cawdor, the chap that betrayed King Duncan that I mentioned before, his title and his land and all of that is being gifted to Macbeth. So we are being given the knowledge that Macbeth will become the Thane of Cawdor. That is very, very important for the next scene. Okay. Final thoughts. What do we have here? We have got the set up of the tragic convention. So he's ticking the boxes for the tragic hero. We have got the idea of Macbeth being the loyal warrior. Very, very important here in terms of setting up that tragic convention, but also showing that character arc, how far he then falls. But it also, as I said, gives the audience vital information for the next scene. It creates dramatic irony, and you'll just need to watch my next video on Act 1, Scene 3 to find out how. If you haven't subscribed, please do so, because videos will keep on coming on various different elements of your English literature and English language GCSE and or A-level. So please do subscribe to see more. If there's anything you'd like me to cover, any themes, any topics, any texts, please just drop me a little note in the comment and I will do my best. Thank you so very much for watching, and happy revising.